All right, so you're Superman.
Got it.
Okay,
I am.
You have your superpowers.
I do.
You have laser vision. You can fly. So you have the power to stop basically any crime happening anywhere in the world almost instantaneously.
Yes.
So the question is then, do you have the responsibility to stop every crime in the world? Is that then your job?
So, like moving wicked fast all the time?
All the time. You can't stop. I mean, because there's always something bad
Flurry
going
of
down.
activity. Yeah. You know, I've got some shows on my Netflix queue. I mean, what do you think? Like, I would say that if you are Superman, then I want to say yes, but then again, that sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah, I agree with you. So here's the thing. This segues pretty well into our conversation that we're going to have today about boundaries. So we're going to talk about, what are the things that are our responsibilities when it comes to how we're investing our time, how we're taking care of ourselves, and how we're being in relationship with other people.
Cool.
So we are talking with your friend, Barry Salisbury, who's done a lot of work in this area and is way more of an expert on this stuff than we are.
Because clearly we can't even figure out Superman boundary questions versus...
Right, and we love comic books,
right.
So this is weird. Cool. So yeah, let's go ahead and jump right into that conversation.
Hello, everyone, again. So we are back and ready for our conversation. That you guys submitted some awesome questions that kind of sprouted out or started a few Saturdays ago and snowballed into a wonderful kind of question fest of boundaries. And Ben and I are not the experts in any way, shape, or form. And so today what we did was we invited ourselves over to Barry Salisbury's house. And she is a wonderful boundary teacher, right? Because you said you're not a master yet.
Takes a lifetime.
But she has worn many hats, taken some off, put more back on. And so I thought that instead of reading kind of the stack of books that we have here that we'll talk about in a little bit, we would just go to some of the wisdom in the source. And so with that, we're going to just kind of jump right into some of the general questions that folks asked and hopefully cover the bases of your questions. And if that raises more, fantastic. Type them in the chat if you want to right now, or email them to Ben because he will have all the answers by Monday.
Right. I'm going to read this entire stack of books by Monday.
Hey,
Right.
challenge accepted.
Right.
Cool.
Yeah, so what we wanted to do was take a look at just a few different ways, different places where we can put boundaries up in our lives to kind of protect different areas of our lives. And Barry's going to, share with us some kind of specific ways that we can do that for each one as we get to those. So the first one that we wanted to talk about, if you guys are ready to jump in?
Yeah. Let's go for it.
The first one we wanted to talk about is putting boundaries on your time and protecting your time and where you invest your time.
For me, I am naturally somebody that would say, yeah, sure, I can do that, and not think about my calendar or not think about our family's calendar, which is actually a bigger scope of things. Mm-hmm. And what we find is that even in all three of these things that we're going to talk about, like Jesus was a really good model for this. And I'm really not, in particular, this thing of time that we can't manufacture more time. And so, Barry, what are some ways that you found are helpful to carve out or protect the time that we have?
Well, I think one of the most important things is to learn that your first answer needs to be no.
Okay, so...
And I think as a Christian, our first answer is often yes, because we think we should do this. This is a good thing, and yes, I can do it. And I know, and I can sacrifice to do it because that's what Jesus did, isn't
Right.
it? He always sacrificed and always did. Wait a minute, that's not what Jesus did. He did take time to rebuild himself, and there were things that he said no to. And so that's for us is the first step is to sit back, and if somebody says, can you do something, which is going to take time, the answer is, let me think about it. If you can't say no, but don't say yes, always, first response.
Right.
Does that help?
Yeah.
So yeah, because that in the way that we can say, let me think about it, give me some time and space. You know, I mean, in Scripture it says, you know, let your yes be yes and your no be no. And
Exactly.
so after we say yes, we've committed a lot of times to things that we don't even, you know, realize have a lot of strings attached to them. And so giving ourselves that time to push back and to, you know, taking maybe 2 extra minutes to think about if you can commit to that will save
Or
you.
10 extra minutes.
Yeah,
or
well,
one
okay.
day.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah,
Depending
right.
on who you're dealing with.
Right.
The crisis of the immediate right now it's always been that way, but it's even more so now. And so to not say, okay, I'll let you know in just 2 minutes. You know, the person that's persistent is going to keep bugging you until you say what?
Say no. Yeah.
The person that's bugging you is going to
Well,
say
until you say yes.
yes, yes,
sure.
exactly. Yeah. So we have to know and then time yourself depending on the type of person you're dealing with, the situation you're dealing with, and just sometimes the best answer is no, I'll get back to you tomorrow.
Right. Well, and I liked how you said that when people come to us and ask us to do something or for help with something that, you know, we often think that because we are capable, either physically or have the skills to do it, that at that point we have to do it.
Exactly.
Because but that we don't like that's
Yeah.
that's critical to remember, because you're right. As Christians, we feel like we have to. That's our responsibility is to
Exactly.
kill ourselves to help with everything, and it's really liberating to come at it with the understanding of no, I don't have to say yes to everything.
Yes.
And that's really hard for me personally.
It's hard for most people,
Right.
unless you're totally narcissistic and
Yeah.
self-centered.
Right.
But I don't think that's most people, and I don't
Right.
think that's especially Christians for the most part, aren't that way. So,
Yeah.
and I think the Bible's replete with stories of who Jesus helped. But we don't know all the people that he walked by and didn't help and things, not because he was hard-hearted, but because he recognized he had a ministry to fulfill and limited time in which to do it.
It is always interesting that we don't think about the times, or we just skip right over those passages that it's, you know, that it was like, now Jesus got in the boat and left, or Jesus saw that it was time to move on.
Yes.
and to go there, and that, you know, in some ways that we don't even think about, that's drawing boundaries around that gift of time.
Yeah, where there were still crowds of people clamoring for his attention and for healing and all these other things,
Exactly.
still bringing people to him, and he recognized that it was time for him and his ministry to move on in order to further God's kingdom where it was supposed to be.
Yeah.
Exactly.
To invest in the disciples, to take personal time and things like
Yes. Yeah.
which kind of segues a little bit into then our second bit, which is in this one I have seasons of being really good at and then absolutely dreadful at, and that's just the boundaries to protect myself.
Yes.
And so the fancy church word is Sabbath keeping, right?
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
And that this would be an example of where Jesus pulls away and goes alone. Right now, the imagery that comes to mind, or the passage that comes to mind, is when he learns of John the Baptist, being beheaded, and so he goes away, and there's some of this kind of personal refreshment that needs to happen there. And so, but the reality is that sometimes we feel like when we try to make these boundaries, is that it's a selfish thing, and so what are some how do we do our Sabbath keeping in a way that
honors the people that we're in relationship with and working with and things like that.
Right.
But is also, gives us the opportunity to be restored and be renewed.
Right.
Yeah.
Great question.
Yeah. How do we do that?
So part of it, I think, we have to recognize that we have value and we have rights and we need to be taken care of, because if something happens to us, how can we take care of everybody else? So probably heard the analogy of the oxygen mask. Every time you get on the airplane, they say, okay, if you have little children, you need to make sure you put the oxygen mask on yourself first and then put it on them. Because what happens if you put it on them first?
Right.
Well,
Then
you end up
you're
passing out before you get it on them.
Right, exactly. So then you both die or
Right,
whatever happens.
right.
So, and that's the piece is saying, okay, well, what is self-care? And it goes, again, back to time. Well, if it's 24/7 about you and your self-care, that's too much, right? But if you never take time to take care of yourself, and then that's not enough time. And scripturally, Jesus went off and took time to pray. He took time to be alone. And especially in this world now where people aren't alone. They're afraid to be alone with themselves. That's how the Holy Spirit comes in. It's when you are alone, when you can actually hear yourself and hear the Spirit and take time to know yourself. But so we need to take time so that we can be built up and then give to others, and that has to be a priority.
Yeah.
So what I hear you saying is that we need to be completely intentional about setting apart time to be alone by ourselves and alone with God and with the Holy Spirit, so that He can work in us, because with all of the technology that we have access to now, we are completely connected to everybody else that we know, all the time.
Exactly.
Whereas, Jesus would pull back with his inner circle, with his not even all 12 disciples, but just a few of them, and recognize those special relationships and care for those relationships and for himself in that way.
Yeah, I think that there may be two, and you can correct me if I'm wrong because you're the expert.
No,
right? but I think
just
that there's
studied it a lot.
there's also kind of this two-dimensional thing of that Sabbath keeping. There is an intentional time where we're not just talking, but we're also listening for God and the Spirit.
Yes.
And then there's also time where we recharge our creativity and and whatever that is.
Hugely
and so
important.
I know that you run, and so for you, I bet that's a recharging.
Very. And I run without an iPod and without things, so that I can be totally focused on rebuilding myself.
And Ben and I often joke, because that's for me a rebuilding thing, is that I could sit and I could run, I could kayak, I could do these individual things that is just Chris alone time, and sometimes they are that restorative listen to God, and then sometimes they're the recharge the batteries. And so for everybody who's experiencing worship right now, they just need to know that the only way that you can recharge your batteries is alone solitude time, right?
And so this is where we differ very greatly, because it's that whole introvert extrovert thing. And for me, I get so much energy being surrounded by people and being in community with my friends and family and doing stuff with people, that the idea of being alone on a river in the quiet for any extended amount of time seems pretty dreadful to me. But that's just me.
It would deplete your batteries, right?
Yeah, exactly. So what? How does this look different for the introvert versus the extrovert?
Yeah,
just finding those passions.
I think we need to figure out, you need to figure out yourself.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
What after I've spent, Henry Cloud, who's one of the authors of Boundaries in Johnstown, who talks about that time, where do when I spend that time that it loses time, that I can spend 4 hours and it's like, where did it go? Because you're in the zone of happiness and renewal. And so different people, if you're an artist, you paint. If you're a musician, you do music. If you're an extrovert, you're around people. If you're an introvert, you're off or into nature, you're off kayaking. So it's different for every person. And, that's another sort of boundary concept, is to respect Ben is different than Chris, is different than Barry.
Right.
We all need to encourage each other to rebuild, but what that looks like is a personal
Sure.
thing.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's cool. A lot of because I've read a lot of like time and attention stuff like that,
Okay,
and
yeah.
workflow and things like that.
Right.
And they will talk about this concept of flow,
Right.
where when you're working on something, you really know that you're doing good work when your time is disappearing, kind of like that. You don't even realize.
Exactly.
And to kind of take that into the boundaries conversation and
Right.
look at flow from the perspective of knowing that you're in a place where you're doing good things for yourself, that
Right.
to recognize that and
Right.
understand that that's good for you, so you can repeat that in the future when you need it.
And the key there also is good, because people with addictions, people with, whether it's a child on a video game that can't get away, that time just disappeared, didn't
Sure,
it?
right.
Or a person with an addiction, that's not good time. And
Sure.
so we really have to differentiate between bad time and good time.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's important.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I like what you said about identifying the ways in which we all, we all may be recharged differently.
Yes.
And so I know that my wife and I recharge very differently. But there are at times where I'm willing to deplete, to have Chris and Katie time. Mm-hmm. But then she's really good at recognizing that, going to the craft store and and the places that she loves to go is not necessarily my sweet spot.
Right.
And so
Right.
so to have this kind of give and take, or that there's a communal thing to boundaries, and
Very much so. That's hugely important.
yeah, and that not only then do we protect our time and our Sabbath keeping, but there's also a relational, it's never just about me as Chris, right?
Right.
And so there's boundaries that we draw around our relationships too, to protect those people that are most important to us. Mm-hmm. And a number of the questions that we've gotten are kind of centered around that, and around the communal aspect of boundary keeping.
Right.
And so how do we establish some boundaries? We have some rules to protect not only my ministry, but also my relationship with Katie. Share with Ben that, if there's counseling that needs to happen, if there's meetings that need to happen,
Right.
I'll make sure that, especially if it's with just a female, that it's out in public. We will go to Panera, we will go wherever, but so that there is an integrity thing, because that is a boundary that we have drawn around our family.
Yes.
To protect that relationship. But what are some other ways that we can draw boundaries, or what are some other ways that you have those boundaries for relationships?
Great question. Many tentacles to that.
Yeah,
So
right. Yeah, right. So I'm asking you
Try
this,
to get
and let's just...
Try to pull it down into things. I think relationships are the make or break of life, and that's really and when we choose someone in a marital relationship, then we want to make that work, and to make that work, we need to have several things. One is really good communication. One of the big pieces in any relationship is truth and transparency. So that's really good that you've gotten that part. But as you said, there are different relationships in our lives. And is everybody on the same importance level as others? No. And Jesus was clear about that. He had the disciples, and he was training them, and he had more time with them. He spent more time with them. He chose them. Just like in marriage, we choose our spouse. So we then, with that, it's a covenantal relationship. We choose them. We say we're going to be with them. So what does that look like? We set time to be with them. We make that a priority. We have transparency in that. And some great books about, we need to be safe so that we can hear each other, and learning how to agree to disagree, and all those respect, all that important stuff. But then moving down, so children, if you have children, you're given them as a gift from God. They are a blessing. Some days you might not feel like that, but they are a blessing. And so we have an exceptional responsibility to our children to protect them, to raise them, and another great book, Raising Great Kids, by them, Boundaries with Kids also. But so we have a very high level of responsibility to them. Work. Obviously, we have a high level of responsibility of work. We need to work to earn our living, and then we need to have an obligation. We have an obligation to do a good job in our work. But then how do all these impact each other? Well, if you become a performance junkie and your value is based on your work, then typically your family's going to suffer, your children and your wife. And so you have to learn the appropriate balance between these areas of your life to make sure that, again, in this tiered system, that you're honoring the ones that are most important. You chose your wife. Your children are there for a season, and you have a certain responsibility, and then they are gone. I can, attest to that. 5, it was great, and now they're gone, and that job's over. So, and work, where do you set those limits? And it's different for every person, but again, it goes back to the analysis. Am I spending too much time at work and not with my wife? Am I spending too much time with my kids and not with my wife? Am I spending too much time by myself rebuilding and not with my kids or at work?
Sure.
And then blaming everybody else because things are falling apart at work because I don't want to invest in it.
Right. Yeah. So it's about finding that sweet spot which is different for every one of us.
Yes.
And not letting ourselves kind of slip to one extreme or the other.
Yes.
With where our attention is focused.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And being honest with ourselves and honest with other people, getting other people to help, good, safe people. Definition of safe people is a person that has your best interest in mind, wants you to grow, to become the most mature, responsible person that you can in God's eyes. And that's the litmus test, really, for us. It's not, should be as Christians, is God proud of me? And am I doing what He would want me to do, and then finding safe people that'll help us grow in that realm.
That won't be afraid to say, you're not doing this right now.
Yeah.
Exactly. I love you enough to say that you're not doing it. And that's what, honoring the honorable and pointing out the dishonorable and helping each of us grow. And all of us have areas, whether it's functional or relational, where we need to grow.
Yeah.
And we need good, safe people to help us really see where we're falling short and where we're doing well. I mean, we all do well in areas.
Yeah,
so,
sure.
Yeah. And have that person that's encouraging us instead of the jealous person that's trying to put you down because you're doing such a great ministry, and
I like that term, safe people. And that's one of those words that I think that I may, in my mind, as I'm trying to think through, may have been substituting for other other things, and that's a good word. You've got the book about it, Safe People, right here. About how we can, find relationships that are good, and how we can avoid those that are not. But the idea of safe people for me kind of elicits a different imagery than like good or bad people, which we're so binary in that.
Right.
And it's not at all about people who are good or bad, or it's not a way that that we then can keep the people who we don't like but maybe safe at arm's length, right? Our boundaries don't allow us or give us a mechanism to judge people. It's not a way that we can separate us from them, but
God made us all.
Like we are.
And we all make bad choices.
That's it, and some of my friends who are in recovery or who are struggling with homelessness, have made a bad choice, or I was interacting with a community of homeless guys for an extended period of time, and one of the things that one of the guys said was, people can tell you that you're crazy, but when you're crazy, you don't realize that, and so it doesn't make him good or bad. During that period of his time. Maybe for a lot of people, he was not a safe person. But then in the cover on the book has a traffic light, right? Because we recognize that there's times where if we make changes, if they make changes, there can be a difference in there. And so it's not a matter of boundaries protect us from going to the places that Jesus calls us, right?
That's exactly
That we look at, Jesus has kind of been our constant through these three themes. And at the same time, he got criticized heavily for not eating and being with and touching the right people. But it was all the people whose hearts were primed, who were safe people, just longing for that relationship.
Yeah, the culture at the time may not have considered them safe people, or even the people that Jesus was spending time with. And not using the definition from this book, but like the people that were around him that were criticizing him wouldn't have considered these safe choices of people to be around.
They were unclean.
Right.
Yeah.
But,
Yes.
but Jesus knew that
Their heart,
exactly,
and their ability.
We can take from that this important lesson of not using this conversation about boundaries to judge others and push people away that make us uncomfortable just because.
That's not the point. Boundaries are never defensive.
Right.
I mean, they're always defensive. They're never offensive.
Right.
And they're to protect your heart and things, but that doesn't mean it limits you from going out and doing things. For sure.
That's awesome.
And when we have those safe, when we have those well-defined boundaries, I think it allows us to step into those relationships with the safe people more authentically. So it's not that, whether those marginalized folks are, we're able to have real authentic relationship, just like Jesus did when he could see the need, the real need of the hearts of people, and it's because there are these clearly defined understandings. And so one of the beautiful questions that we got was kind of cool. So we talk about this for a little bit. We talk about boundaries, but either my boundaries are no good, or I don't have any, or it's been so long since I have stirred them up. So is there just a way to start fresh? Could you give us some help with that? If I'm just clean slate, come in and saying, I think this thing boundaries is what I need because I'm a disaster. Like I watch cat videos online 10 hours a week, and I feel
only 10 hours? Oh, come on.
Oh gosh. And my plate is full of the little things, or I spend all my time doing the crowd ministry, and I'm not investing in this is actually maybe speaking to my heart more, right? Is that like I'm investing in the crowd ministry, and the leaders that I know that I need to lead up, I might not be so good at, and so help me.
I think it was in John, you guys would probably be able to do the cite on it, where Jesus came to give grace and truth. And those go together. And what they are often in this world seen as antagonistic, but they're not. And so we have to have the truth to face reality. And then sometimes we have to give grace to people to help them move to the next spot, or grace to ourselves. That's another one we don't limit. So that's just a general framework on, I think a lot of the boundaries came out of recognizing that Jesus came to bring grace and truth, and that boundaries with children, boundaries of relationship, everything. Sometimes we could be too graceful. You just always give in. Next thing you become an enabler.
Right.
Or you can be too truthful, and then you just alienated everybody because you have no grace in that. I mean, there are all times, all of us are unsafe at times, and us safe at others. So we have to do that balance, and there's that trick in that. But then moving it forward, the whole boundaries comes out of, or at least my training, and a lot of people reading the word boundaries came out of the book Boundaries that Henry Cloud and John Townsend wrote.
Boom!
Can't remember a while ago. Yeah, and so I always keep a little card with me that in the morning I have it, and because it talks about, I want to remember the 10 boundaries, because the 10 boundaries are a great framework for giving your life direction, because if we don't have direction, we just become this oozeball, and so so it's that's, and so to go over them, so don't miss, the first one is of sowing and reaping. 2 ways that it goes. You need to be able to sow what you reap, and conversely, often an enabler will step in so that the other person doesn't reap their irresponsibility, because I'll fix that because they didn't get their homework done.
Right.
So that's a better example. Parent that, you didn't get your homework done on time, I can't believe it, here, I'll help you with it, let's get it done. And then over time that 2-year-old becomes the 5, they don't have homework at 2, but becomes the teenager who's the parents making the experiment.
Right.
And then the kid, as fast forward, play it forward, and they're 20, and 30, and they're living off mom and dad because they were never allowed to reap what they were sowing.
Right.
So that's what the law of responsibility, I think, for most people is huge. What am I responsible for? We are responsible for our actions. What Ben does, Ben is responsible for. Ben is responsible for his own thoughts. You're responsible for your attitudes. Mm-hmm. You're responsible for your prejudices. Your words and your actions, just like Chris is responsible. Conversely, you're not responsible for Chris's words or his attitudes or his actions. And yet in that then it comes this cleansing, because when I go to the spot where I'm not having a good thought, I say, wait a minute, I'm in charge of that thought.
Right.
Let me captive that thought and let me redirect that thought, because I'm in charge of it. When I do something that isn't nice, I can't blame Chris. My action is my result. It's a response I'm responsible for. And so then flip it around. You've heard people say, well, you make me angry.
Right.
Or you made me do this. No, you don't. And so it's taking responsibility. Learning is very important. I am responsible for my words, my actions, my feelings, my attitudes. And then also my giving. And then that goes into, we'll flip down to the law of motivation. Why am I giving? Am I giving out of guilt? Am I giving because I'm afraid that person, if I say no, they'll go ballistic, so I'll give? Am I giving out of genuine love because I love that person and I want, that's good, So we have to look at what is my motivation. A lot of people that have bad boundaries, they have this internal guilt that they have to do everything. A lot of Christians I have to do that because Jesus would have done it. Wait a minute, no. So your motivation is wrong. You've got the the wire in that head is not wired right. So you need to fix that. Make sure your motivation is a good one, not fear and all those things. One is law of power. We have power to do things, and one of them is the power to admit that we're screwed up and we need help, and we get the help. So, and that we have power to reach out to other people. We have power to say no. So we do have some power. We don't have the power to control other people.
And that kind of gets back to your idea when we were talking about self-care, of valuing who you are.
Yes.
To say, I have value and I have the power to set some time aside so that I can do things I need to do to get back up.
Right.
Yeah, nice.
Right. And we have that power. Whether we choose to use the power is a different thing. Just like if we have the responsibility to be responsible for our prejudice, and say, instead of going, that's, say, wait a minute, why am I being this ridiculous? So we have the responsibility we're responsible for those things. So respect, this is a big one. I need to respect that you have a different opinion than I do. And you and I can voice our opinion, and we can explore our opinion, and we need to do it, as Christians, we need to do it kindly. But then we need to be able to walk away from the conversation and say, that's great. We're 180 degrees opposed. You go do your thing, I'll go do my thing, and we respect each other.
Mm-hmm. So when we all know that Ben is wrong about extroverts recharging with other people.
Right.
Like we can, there needs to be some mutual respect there that when
I'm allowed to also know that you are wrong about your introversion.
Exactly. We agree to disagree.
Right.
That's the classic. We need to and laugh about it.
Right. So that on the car ride home, there's going to be conversation rather than just
exactly. And play that out in any relationship, whether it's a marital relationship or you with your teenager. Yeah. We're going to have to agree to disagree. I love you enough to say no. Yeah. Just because all your friends are doing it, we're not going to do it. We have a different value system. I respect theirs. I have a different one. This is ours. So learning to, and that's where I think Christians got really tripped up, because people want to tell us we're judgmental. Wait a minute, we're responsible for our actions and our thoughts. So I'm supposed to have my own thoughts.
Right.
And so I'm going to respect yours, you need to respect mine.
We did last year, actually, right about a year ago, we did a series on world religions, and the
Yes.
whole premise is that we could come have a cup of coffee with somebody of
Yes.
a different belief,
Yes.
and leave that not being frustrated, but saying, hey, we should
Exactly.
do this again sometime, because it's
Exactly.
not, there's a mutual respect, and then as the disciple of Jesus, it's not me who converts and not me who imparts, but it's
Exactly.
so that's a helpful thing. But there's this
Exactly.
respect.
We're
that
not
we
the
are,
judge.
right? But we
Yeah.
are all these children of God, and so to
Exactly.
respect that on each other, that's nice.
Yeah, so that's a big one. Evaluation. We do need to evaluate how, when we say no, it's going to impact that person.
Right.
So otherwise you're just so tunnel visioned that you can live a very destructive life because you just don't take anybody else's thoughts or attitudes in. But that doesn't mean just because they're going to pout or run after you, the abuser, you think about, evaluate how they're going to go after me. So then you keep enabling them?
Right.
No. But we do need to evaluate it and figure out how is it. And then sometimes, okay, this is really going to hurt their feelings and it's for the wrong reason. So I need to change what I'm going to do.
Mm-hmm.
But it's all an internal evaluation of how it's going to handle other people. So we need to do that, but that doesn't. We need to then direct our response to what's the appropriate response in light of the bigger picture, not just their reaction.
Yeah.
Does that make
Nice.
sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Proactive, law of proactivity. It's very easy to be reactive.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like that. You blow up. The law of proactivity is you need to go out and do something, not just react. Figure it out ahead of time and solve it, not, I hate that, or you can't do that, or whatever. So, and that's a very liberating thing. It takes work, though, to be proactive. It's very easy to be reactive.
Right.
Boundaries take work. That's why a lot of people don't want to do them.
Can you give us an example of like a way we can be proactive in in anything? But in the context of boundaries, I understand reactivity.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I feel like that's me most of the
Okay.
time. But for what is it that we can do to be proactive from a boundary setting standpoint?
Okay, so let's just deal with a teenager first. A teenager comes in and is screaming at you because they want to go out with their friends, and then next thing you know, you're screaming back at them. So we're having a battle of the emotions. This is really helpful, right? Yeah. No, so instead, to be proactive, you realize, okay, my teen is going through a lot of stuff. They're hormonally changing, there's peer pressure, and I, as a parent of a teen, need to recognize that they have these emotional ups and downs, and they're going to be pushing my limits. They're not going to like it. So that when they come in and start to yell at you, and then you start to just say, no, and you engage, then all of a sudden, you no longer are going to, as the louder they yell, the louder you yell, the louder, and it goes on up. You're going to be the mature adult to have figured out, okay, they're not going to like this,
Right.
my answer. How am I going to handle their verbal whatever, and I'm going to be proactive and anticipated it and then come up with a better approach. I'm going to be the mature adult in this one, not the reactive blow up.
Right. Okay.
So thinking 2-3 steps down the road,
Yes.
where you get into that like repetitive, loop that's not helping anybody, and try to short
Right.
circuit,
Right.
in some ways, and say, okay, well, we don't need to spin our wheels here. We
Right.
can pick that up. Yeah.
And then
nice.
play it out. Another example would be if you find yourself reactive. We all get reactive for
Yeah.
different things, different times. I mean, that's part of human nature, And so to recognize then, time out. Let's call a timeout on yourself.
Right.
Not just on them. I think we need to say, I need a timeout. I'm sorry. And then I'm out of control. I realize it. And then remove ourselves.
That's a good proactive
Yes.
step.
It's a very, But it takes maturity and it takes insight
Right.
and it takes some planning.
Sure.
Self-reflection.
Awesome.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, so, what's your litmus test? If you feel your heart rate, okay, time out for me and I'm leaving.
Right.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay. Excellent.
okay. Envy. The law of envy, you're a great video guy. I'd love to be able to do that. Okay, well, that's great. So what do I need to do it then? I can't just envy you for it.
Right. That doesn't
Yeah.
get you anywhere.
It makes me bitter, angry, jealous, all those things. Okay,
Right.
I either accept you have talent I will never have, and I'll never be able to do this, or wow, you learned all this stuff. How can I learn it? What do I need to do? And then I do the steps to do it. So envy is very destructive. The only envy if it's a thing about, okay, I envy that, I hate that person, they have that car, they have this, whatever you envy is bad. But if you decide that it's something that you really want, and then you need to work for it, then that's a powerful motivator. Again, if it's a good thing.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
It kind of empowers, if you're looking and seeing and discerning that might be a path that you want to go down.
Yes.
It's a kind of empowering thing to then,
Or to put a cap on yourself, to say, I'm envying that person has, an office, or that they have money that they don't have,
Yeah.
or they have a job or a relationship that I don't have. And say, wait a minute, stop it. I'm supposed to be content with what I have.
Mm-hmm.
That's the Philippians, 4:11.
Yeah.
15, right? And don't envy. Envy is the root of bitterness and jealousy, and
Yeah.
you can attack people, you knock them off of the knees just because you're jealous of them. That's a very destructive emotion.
Yeah.
So you're not supposed to be envious. And we all are, so then we
Right.
have to learn,
Right.
recognize it again, like the being proactive, and put a lid on it.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. The law of activity is taking initiative, not just sitting back and doing it. If you want to succeed in life, Jesus took a lot of initiative. We all need to take initiative. So we need to be active and take initiative and decide, this is important to me and I'm going to do it. So,
Nice. Yeah. The kind of like self-starter type of,
yes.
I see. Yeah.
Yeah, everybody can find problems.
Right.
People come in, there's a problem, here's a problem, here's a problem, here's a problem.
It's easy to point those out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Anybody can point out problems.
Come with a solution too.
Come with a solution. A
yeah.
viable solution.
Yeah.
Not a pie in the sky solution. Think about the
The
solution.
next step. Yeah.
Yeah, it's good to identify problems. There's nothing wrong with that. But
Right.
if you just identify them, then the world is just never going to amount to
Full of people pointing out all the problems.
Exactly.
I had a conversation with somebody recently. It may have been before or after worship one time, and it was that people are easy to say, well, this one doesn't work or this system isn't perfect, and you say find one that's better, because if we would have found one that's better, we probably would be doing it,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly. Are you
yeah.
like me when they do that? You feel your blood pressure rising, and that's where it's like, okay, put a boundary on it.
Yeah.
That is a common human thing, but I'm just going to say, look, then find another one and walk away.
Yeah. Well, that's
Put it behind you. It's
Yeah.
easier said than done.
right.
Yeah.
My with pastor hat on, if I'm doing well at it, and
Yes.
somebody says, what you should be doing is that I'll reframe sometimes. So if anybody's watching, when you hear me say something like, that sounds like you're really passionate about that.
Yeah.
Would you
Yeah.
be willing to step in? And a lot of times it's that we don't have the manpower.
Proactive. There he
right.
is. He's got his script.
Sounds like.
Yeah.
So Ben comes to me and says, you should really do some church online stuff each week. And I'd be like, you know what, guy?
Sounds like that's something you're passionate
You
about.
Yeah.
sound.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Remember
there's
that conversation.
Yeah. And look what happened.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, just after the first time we tried it, and it was this might go somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We need to make some changes. So that's awesome.
I think I've gone through 9. I think the last one that I haven't talked about is the law of exposure. And that's where we need to bring the light into our lives. And we need to expose the dark places. The addictions are done in secret. A lot of bad behaviors are done in secret. And that's where we need to bring the light in and expose the light and save people and confess. That's the confession of where I am falling short. And out of coming, as you know, from the pastoral standpoint, confession is the first part of healing and of growing. And so if we can finally admit, it's that first time admitting that we have the problem admitting that we have that shortcoming. And Christians need to have a better understanding that we are human and we fail. That doesn't mean we can continue to fail. That's
Right.
not what Jesus' point was. But first you admit it, you expose it to someone, a safe friend in context, have them work through it with you, and then you move on. And through that, then we can grow.
Nice. So as you're going through the list, one of the things that my hope is that as we are following Jesus more faithfully, as we are being the people that we're called to be, that we are less the victim and
Yes.
more empowered.
Yes.
And all 10 are these really empowering things that
Exactly.
that even envy, when it's the negative kind of envy, it roots us. But when it's a
Right.
boundary setting kind of envy, it will encourage us on, or it'll put a cap on, or
Exactly.
so that life isn't just happening to you, but that you can in kind of in the best types of way, that boundaries empower and help you regain control.
That's exactly what the
Yeah.
cover says.
Yeah.
Regain
Hey,
control
there we are.
of your
Yeah.
life. We've circled completely around.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so then the question is, so now I've got my list, right, or I've got in my mind this new set of boundaries,
Yeah.
or ways to work and do this thing, and so I've got this new ideal, and hopefully I'm communicating some of those to people, but then Ben comes and just like blows the roof off of my boundaries. And so we talked about safe people and things like that, and maybe Ben's not. He's not a red light yet, right, in our thing. Maybe a yellow,
Okay.
maybe sometimes, whatever. But then you had mentioned that there are times and places then that we start to then have those boundaries, and we like to get to this healthy place. But what about those people that don't respect those boundaries?
We have to limit our exposure to people that don't accept our boundaries. And also, if we're people that have really poor boundaries, we need to, it takes a long time. It takes you a long time, like anything, to develop a bad habit. Bad boundaries are bad habits that
Right.
have life-altering negative things for you. And when it has life-altering negative for you, then you can't do Christ's ministry. You can't do any ministry because you're a mess. And some of the best people I know have very poor boundaries. They're great people, but eventually
Yeah.
it takes its toll. So you have to do it in a process, slowly. And that's where you have to identify some safe people to be around. You practice that, and in the book, book's very well done because it talks about when you first start implementing boundaries. And it talks about different boundaries in your family, boundaries in work, boundary thing, and then how to implement it. And you do it slowly. And you first do a little baby no in a safe setting with
Baby
someone.
no.
And then that's how you go through. And then take one of them. You can't. It's like you can't change the world into.
Yeah.
Rome wasn't built in a day. So this takes time and takes practice. But what's interesting is as you practice this, if you start identifying that you are associating with a lot of manipulative, controlling people that love your great abilities, they know you can do this, they're lazy, whatever, and
Right.
they're constantly using you to get what they want. As you put up boundaries with them, you stop enabling them, which is better for them too.
Right.
And then you start to find, those are called boundary busters in the book, but you start to find boundary lovers, and your whole community changes, at least the time. As a pastor, you have to be around everyone. Well, all of us have to be around everyone.
Yeah.
So we have to learn how to react well or work well in all different settings. But as you grow, you'll find in your inner circle, you'll find more people with good boundaries that then can help you continue to grow. And that's why it does. It takes grace and truth and time.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, that's really good. I mean, because it's so easy to have a conversation like this and get all amped up because it's all. I mean, it's all so
Exactly.
good, and like you were talking about how a lot of times when we hear the word boundaries, we hear these constraints that are going to be put on our life, and it's such the opposite with
It's
this, where
liberating.
it lets you get up and move
Unlocks,
forward and
yeah.
live your life.
Exactly.
And you hear that and you get all jazzed and ready to do it, and then it doesn't happen tomorrow.
No.
So it's
Right.
yeah, it's so critical to to point out that this is a process that takes time, just like anything that's worth
Reading,
doing.
when you learn to read, you
Yeah.
know, think how long that took, and this will take time, but it's so worth doing the work.
Yeah.
So, and there are workbooks. They have a boundaries workbooks. There are classes people can do.
Yes,
and
I am going to
yeah.
put links in the notes section
Right.
to many of these books that you see sitting on the table here. So if you're looking for more resources, you can look in the notes there to get to those. I'm also going to include the list of laws that you read off
Yeah.
there in the notes too.
Yeah.
So if you want to check that out, you can do that.
So yeah, we have some books that we'll talk with you about, but right now, I think what we'll do is just say thank you for your time.
Yes.
Oh,
This
sure.
is
Thank you for
so fantastic.
coming. Yeah, I hope it's helpful.
I've got notes to take and no's to say and
Yeah,
start with the baby nose.
Yeah.
Like that.
yeah.
But yeah, thank you, Barry, for all this.
Well, thanks for
and,
asking, and
Yeah.
hope it
Cool. Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And don't forget to read. That'll help
That's
put
it.
it all into there. I think that's one of the big things to know is there are resources now
Cool.
to really help us
And this,
grow.
yeah, this is just
Yes.
the beginning of that conversation. Like
Exactly.
this is just scratching the surface, really.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But there's so much hope and there's so much opportunity, and it's really is great to be able to grow
Yeah.
into the person God wants you to be and live a life that you give out of love, and you're helping people for the right reasons. And you're taking care of yourself, and you've identified the groups. You're taking care of your family appropriately, and everything. It's a good feeling.
Thank you so much for joining us at Faith Point Online for our 5th Saturday conversation this week on boundaries. Thank you to Barry for joining us and bringing some expertise that we would not have been able to bring on our own. I'm so thankful for her for making herself available. If Faith Point Online is a ministry that you would like to support, you can do that financially using text to give with the information that's popping up on your screen now, or you can give online with the give links at the top of the screen. That's just one way that you can support Faith Point Online.
One other way that is actually really powerful is that you can share what we're doing. You can share the video of today's conversation that we'll have available. And we were talking that we're going to start making Ben's messages available through our kind of home website. And so just share the word, spread it out, and let's invite more people to be in the conversation, part of the community, because we're building something super super cool and
That's
fun
right.
to be a part of. So
Awesome. Yeah, and so we'll be back next week with our regularly scheduled Saturday night service, Saturday night at 7 p.m. Eastern. We're going to be talking about being a community that brings the kingdom here, now, where we're at. So I hope that you'll join us for that. Thank you so much for being here, and we'll see you next week.
Cool. See you guys.
Bye.